We share, of course, an interest in democratic processes. I dropped the digital from the title for now, because in the end I had to make choices, and in 20 minutes there's only so much that you can do. So I thought, okay, I'll look at democratic processes and I'll focus more on the participatory elements, which also connects to the talk that Francis is going to give later today. And focus on first this notion of hybrid intelligence. So, well, this is a slide that comes from a proposal that we made a couple of years ago. We got a big grant in the Netherlands for 20 million euros to be able to spend on research for a period of 10 years. And of course, the amount of money is one thing, but to be allowed to work on the same theme with support from your government for 10 years, I think is fantastic. So in that grant, we pitched this idea of hybrid intelligence and saying, you know, we would like to come to a use of artificial intelligence in which it augments human intelligence, interacts with it, but also that AI learns from humans. So let's make it a co-evolutionary system in which both learn, hopefully for the best. Of course, that you never know. This slide basically says, well, you know, AI gives all these opportunities. On the left hand of the slide, you see the possibilities for, say, benefits that you could reap from it, enhancing autonomy of people, enlarging the experiences that you could share or could have, new activities, new research questions, you know, go beyond the known unknowns, strengthening democracies. And on the other hand, we also seen, and in particular on the democracies, we've seen also the threat that AI can pose on our democracies. So this kind of tied it together for me, that I'd like to see if I can use artificial intelligence to support democratic processes. And that means that in our view, to make sure that you get the strength of it, the benefits, and you have to try to align AI with human values. And how do you do that? Which human values then also? And that means that my research of what I tell today is focused on those values. Now let's step for a moment a bit to this democratic notion. Here you see on a slide a number of topics related to democratic processes, decision-making processes, etc., where I'd like to also tie back to the first two stories of this morning, Ian and now I forgot your name, Jens. Thank you. Because this decision-making is, of course, an integral part of that, and I think also in democratic processes, what I refer to as the system one thinking, but I think so eloquently really put as, say, embodied embedded cognition by Ian, plays a huge role other than, say, our high cognitive thinking on opportunities and strategies and so on. So I'd like to understand more about that, and I hope that there are more that are looking for a connection between these two. When do you switch from system one to system two? Would be interested in collaborations on that. Anyway, if we're looking at democracies, there's always this quest of how do we connect governments to the people, to the citizens? How do they make decisions, and when and how? Can we make that more participatory? And if you do that, then how does that scale, and what other effects has it? Furthermore, I'm also very much interested in notions of inclusivity. Is the material that we're making really gathering everyone in our decision-making process, even those that in some extent, you know, are avert from the notion of having governments in the first place? You know, can we connect? Can we get to understand each other better? And also in getting to understand each other better, I believe in understanding people's motivations from a value perspective. I think that helps. And I'll try to make that a bit more precise. I added this slide as a kind of an overview of how you could add participatory decision-making in democracies. but I'll focus most on the one that's a bit on the upper row with the red one in it, is the deliberation. So my focus today will be on deliberation. And I would like to connect a bit forward to Frances' talk. She's going to talk more about how this deliberation could take place, which would result, I hope, for the work that I'm discussing today in say, utterances, texts in the end, so transcribed conversations that I could help evaluate. And so let's dive into it a bit more. If you want to think about joint decision making or group decision making in, say, democratic aspects, we have to make some hard choices that unfortunately there is no solution that everyone likes best. Right? And if that were the case, then decision making is easy, but we're always seeing positions of people that seem to be at a stance from each other where they cannot overcome their differences. And yeah, sometimes that's as it is. You can't do something about it, but in other cases you can. If you understand better what drives and motivates people, I think you will see that most people are not the monsters that others would make them out to be. They all have a stake in what they believe in and what they value. Maybe they make different choices, but can we find something like solutions in between that help bridge the gap? Now, as Dirk was saying, I've done a lot about negotiation, and I've developed a lot of software that helps people get the most out of negotiations, bidding software, when to accept, all those elements. And they all start with a formalized model of the negotiation space, understanding, giving them a profile of what people prefer over other things, so a preference profile model. And then these agents can do this negotiation for you. However, where do these models come from? And this is where I think that it makes sense to start listening to each other and to see if we can get information from deliberations about their value systems, and then seeing if you can propose ideas, solutions that actually cater for some of those values. How do you do that? Now here you see 3 people. 2 people already took a stance. And in a sense, I think that the story of Ian for me is also appealing, because if I see, say, the green one as being really different from what the red one is proposing, then how do I approach until this bifurcation moment, and then I'll make a choice, right? Okay, what is influencing my choice? Is it just the rationale of it, or is it also the relationships that we have amongst each other? Is it the network that we're part of, to go back to Jens? So all these elements for me are important, but I do hope that if I can understand what drives them, and in particular see their value systems, because value systems only start really to make a real difference if you have the time to make a choice and if your life is not threatened, right? And so here you see, well, the Maslow pyramid. Who has heard of the Maslow pyramid? A few, okay. So others don't. Well, this is where you already get some free education then. So, you know, the bottom layer, physiological needs, survival first. There is no need to start thinking on where you put your energy system or whether or not it's going to be green if at this moment your life is under threat. Very simple, right? And so you see safety needs coming up. Then you see a love and belonging, which I think also ties very nicely again to the biological side of our existence. Then things like esteem. To what extent do I get respect from you in terms of listening, in terms of do you get respect from me in trying to give you a story that you're, would like to listen to. And then there's this self-actualization. How can I present myself? Now, if we connect that to basic human values, then there are 2, well, there are more theories, but I picked out these 2. Schwartz values is a dominant one, and the moral foundation theory. And these values are kind of grouped in a way that they're sort of universal. And that holds something interesting, because if it's universal and I know that, for example, I don't know, say power is something that is really important to you, then that's a driver for the choices that you make. And so the idea was that these values transcend over different domains in different contexts. And to some extent they do, but in reality it's more tricky than that. And that's what I'd like to share a little bit of a story about. So what we found is a way to create AI support to align humans through their values. And the first part of that is what I'm going to tell today. So first, a bit more on values. So values refer to these goals. So I think your question very nicely relates to that. It starts with that. You know, what's your position in life? Value beliefs are linked to effect. So indeed, the choices that you make to some extent hold with those values. There are standards of criteria. They can be ordered by importance, and so we don't all have the same ranking of those values. But these value priorities guide the actions that we take, as long as not interrupted by, say, Maslow's pyramid. And then this notion that these values would transcend context. And that's where we found a bit of a problem. So let me take you to this story. We use this Mortal Foundation's Twitter corpus, so it's very interesting, of course, to know good data sets, and this is one that you might have a look at. It has 35,000 tweets divided in 7 data sets, and they're annotated with these Mortal Foundation theory values. So you see the 7 data sets that are listed there. You see all lives matter, and you see, for example, also the Black Lives Matter. We'll get back to those in a bit more detail. And you see these values of care versus harm, fairness versus cheating, loyalty versus betrayal, authority versus subversion, and purity versus degradation. Now, if you look at the rhetorics that are being made in those tweets, and we look again at these all lives matter and these Black lives matter, then generally they have the same or similar value rhetorics that you can see. And they're both talking about fairness, equality, justice, and talking about, of course, fairness. The other side is cheating. If we're talking about equality, then we're also talking about fraud. And if we're talking about justice, you also see stuff appearing about corruption, right? There's one interesting point, but that they do differ for the value of subversion. And that's like this. In the All Lives Matter, there are things like overthrowing and mayhem is frowned upon. You should stay with the existing status quo. And in Black Lives Matter, you see in these tweets, these people had something, have something to rebel against. So you see that it encourages defiance. So yes, subversion for both is important, but on the other side of the spectrum. So if we think that values transcend context, well, not directly. You have to make it more specific than that. And that means that if you want to align AI with human values, you'll have to make it context specific. So you have to understand what the domain specific values are related to the values that you're looking into. So, okay, so basic human values, they're general, they're abstract, they're nice and easy to talk about, they're applicable, as it seems, at least we can talk about it across contexts, and they're nicely suitable for societal questions. However, if you look at the context-specific values, now you get something that's really applicable to context. That they are related to these abstract values, but in a very specific contextual way. And that means they are the ones that you can really use concretely in specific context. So how do we get then towards context-specific alignment of AI with human values? How do you identify these values? So I'm zooming in more in the story and now going into what do we do to identify those. Now, for this we introduced a hybrid intelligence methodology called AXIS, where we use human intelligence plus artificial intelligence to make the decisions on that. So the method simplifies and distributes the value identification process. So in the middle you see the axis method, on the left-hand side you see an opinion corpus, and on the right-hand side you see a value list. And underneath you see the annotators. And this brings me to a very important, interesting point, I think, certainly in the age of LLMs, where people start using LLMs to do the annotations instead of hiring people. And that kind of makes sense because, hey, these LLMs, they are basically trained on huge data sets, so they represent some kind of average human annotation weight or so, if you might say. But then think again, if you're really thinking about democracy, are you really interested in the average? Or do you want to create a democratic society in which all people feel at home, not only the average ones, in which you try to bridge the gap between the minorities as well, and not just the average ones? Then, if you take that more seriously, there's the point of language. Language is subjective. What I say to you today comes across with you in a certain way, and that differs for the people sitting here in the room. I might not express myself as neatly as I'm supposed to. Meaning that you might interpret my values in a different way than I hope to get across. So actually, what's the sense of having one annotation here? Right? We would like to understand better what the differences also are, what the distribution is of how people look at these things. Then you get way more information. So what we did here is making sure that the technologies, the AI aspects underneath Axis help people explore the data set and then help bring the annotators in discussions amongst themselves to discuss it, to understand whether or not this is a different value that they see at some point, or that they interpret things differently, or that they say, well, actually we're talking about the same things. So here we are going to consolidate, merge values, or we keep them separate. And that way you get a way more rich annotated data set than if you just say, okay, let's average out what most people do, or instead of averaging out, making it even simpler and let an LLM do it, right? So that's what we did. So in terms of this exploration, in the exploration phase, each annotator independently develops their own value list. So context specific, right, for whatever domain you're talking about. And you see all the data entries that you see. What the system helps them do is, on the basis, of course, also with natural language processing techniques, see if I can find similar entries. And then, so once people are making a couple of these annotations of values, I give them a similar entry and ask them, you know, is there something new in here or not? And then see if that is indeed then related to the same value. But then also to say, okay, once we've done some similar ones, I would like to see if we together can explore the space as well as possible. So I want to take you to something new, something you haven't seen. So I use the same type of NLP techniques now to find something that is most different. So far away as possible in the data set as you can find it. And that helps you in a more strategic way to roam through your data set. And if you want to do human annotation, yeah, you typically see, you know, if you're lucky, they do 5% of the annotation of the whole data set, right? If it's a really beautiful, rich one, then it might be 10%, but yeah, that's basically what you see. So you better have a strategic, well-covered way of annotating that data set. And this is what Axis can help you do. So it's being used currently also by other companies and organizations to help them do this annotation better. And as I said, in the consolidation phase, the annotators in a group collaborate, talk about it to see if they should want to merge some of their individual value lists as they discovered, because of course they did see different parts of the data set. And it helps them through the process via this moderation. And then you see a joint list coming out, not a joint list as we agree in everything that we say, but we agree to disagree on some aspects, and that means it stays. Yeah, that's the whole day idea. So of course we tried this on different data sets. We started this work at the beginning of Corona epidemic. So guess what? We have a data set on COVID with some 60,000 answers that was collected through a participatory value evaluation system, initially set up by Niek Mouter. And Niek had a question from our government to give a response in 2 weeks on what these 60,000 people or 60,000 answers contained. So he enlisted the help of some students and then went over some 600 entries. We did the whole data set for him in a few minutes. Yeah, for a few minutes that was triggered by him. You see how observations and decisions really triggered by the environment. So, so our research questions were there. Does axis then yield indeed these context-specific values? Do you see that they agree on that? And what are the differences between these, say, axes found context-specific values and the basic values? Now, the results on specificity, so it yields values that are way more indeed context-specific than the basic values. And if you apply, for example, the energy, the values found in an energy domain, and you see if this is applicable to the COVID domain, not so much. So Schwarz is indeed in the middle of that, right? If you see it like that. But the red ones on COVID, they're way more on target. In terms of, and I'll skip this for now, in a relationship with the Schwarz values, you only see them for a few of the most important ones. So, last slide. Our mission is basically to shift people away in their thinking already from autonomous AI to hybrid intelligence, to get rid of the idea that you should replace people, but that you should augment them, and that you shouldn't think about autonomy, but let's have fun in collaboration, so do co-activity. No escalated AI, but let's make the use of different AI techniques, also diversity there. And raise ethical awareness in humans on the use of AI. With that, thank you.